I don't really want to know how much I spent on mechanical keyboards over the past 4 years. But one thing is clear, I never spent as much as I did on the Geist from Geistmaschine, a keyboard that is entirely made in Germany, machined from solid blocks of aluminum and chiseled into what is arguably one of the most polarizing designs to date. I placed my order on the Geist back in December of 2021, after the first search of one of my videos on this channel, the one about the NuFi Air 96. Filled with newfound confidence and a taste for custom keyboards, I pressed the buy button, which cost me €1,126.05. Then came the accessories in the form of the T-stand and a polished knob for an additional €270.17. Those costs, combined with switches and keycaps, along with shipping as well as import fees, resulted in a divorce-justifiable final sum of just over €1,800, or around $2,000. 2 years later, I finally received my unit, but the once high excitement has since dwindled quite a bit, and remorse has made its way into my consciousness, replacing the once spirited decision to put down a fortune for what basically amounts to as a heavy computer peripheral. During the initial unboxing, my fear was further cemented, for I initially found it to be a bit lacking. It just didn't feel like $1,000. Partially that must have been because the frame seemed to be wrapped in the same transparent plastic I cover my cooking attempts in before I eventually forget them in the fridge for the next 4 weeks. Not being discouraged easily, I continued to make my way through the box to find a little certification card attached to the accessories box, telling me that I was the 53rd person that didn't have its finances under control that day. Below in the darkly molded support structure was the knob, wrapped in that dreadful plastic as well, and next to it, the little accent piece for the lower right half of the Geist, also cocooned. To the left was the little daughter board, which felt really nice out of the box. I was a bit curious how it would perform once assembled, as I had received my Geistmaschine Studio macro pad a year prior, and wasn't really satisfied with that rotary action, but more on that later. Finally, there was the centerpiece, literally the signature half moon and probably the most striking element of the board. It's not just for show though, it acts as the levitator and gives you the 5.5% typing angle, which I found quite comfortable. I purchased the graphic edition of the Geistmaschine, which is now absent from their website, with only the engineering edition remaining for the public to gawk at. The most immediate difference between these models is probably the use of brass instead of aluminum and the transparent top housing, which gives a peek into the inner workings. By contrast, the graphic edition seems almost a little boring. But I didn't pick it because it reflected my equally describable personality, but rather because it was simply cheaper. And I must admit, during my 2-year wait for this board, every time a picture of the Geist showed up, it was in the engineering edition, and every time I thought to myself, did I pick the wrong one? But alas, when the day of unwrapping came, I was pleasantly surprised. I actually think it looks great, and feels great too, even if it is cheaper, although using the word cheaper in the context of the Geist feels almost like a joke, just like my bank account. The inner parts aren't just grey either, there's a slight shimmer to it, akin to concrete on a hot summer's day, with a slightly more earthy tone to it. Both fit stunningly beautiful together and create a very nice two-tone finish, and got me strangely excited again after this long wait. I started by attaching the rubber feet, of which there are only 2 at the front, as the half moon takes care of the back. At first I was again a bit disappointed. The feet felt a bit flimsy and difficult to insert, but my initial ignorance was quickly corrected once I saw how well they fit into the resting place without resorting to nasty glue. But to complete this build, we must not only add but remove first, or separate, like the bottom right screw that secures the inner piece at the front and also keeps the magnet in place for the accent piece. Then we must flip it around and remove a total of 3 plastic screws that secured the other side. An interesting approach, I must admit, one that I have not seen before on any other build. Then it was time to explode all the bits and gush over the finish once more. There's something oddly satisfying when looking at softly machined metal parts. Not sure if this is a weird fetish of mine, but I generally got even more excited about it at this point. Not that kind of excitement, mind you. Let's continue. First I gave my attention to the top piece and its grooves meant for the foamy gaskets that sit in between in this sandwich of metal and art. The other half needed some attention too, but with a more delicate hand. There was also one piece without any sticky residue, meant as a bed of sorts for the little rotary knob PCB. But we must wait before we continue with that, as it requires more work to be done elsewhere. First we have to do something I always disliked the most, looping. But it has to be done, and for the Geist I chose to go with a set of TX stabs. I've had good experiences with these, and I wanted only the best for the Geist, to make sure all the parts match the heavy price tag. After this treacherous process was done, it was time to look at the top half of that box we ignored earlier. It's where we find the plate, various layers of foam, and the PCB. This is probably the least exciting piece of the puzzle. Nothing wrong with it, but whereas everything else seems to have some sort of twist to it, this seemed rather pedestrian in comparison. But again, there's nothing wrong with it. And one by one, the stabs were added along with the foam layer for the PCB. Then another flip to the back in order to add the little stoppers for the TX stabs to give the clip-ins a firmer seating. For the first time in any build, I actually wiped down the PCB after the installation. I always end up getting a bit of lube all over the place, which happens when you're excited. But usually I never bother cleaning up after myself. This time, however, I again wanted to make sure everything is perfect. After a ceremonial cigarette, it was then time to attach the short ribbon cable between the PCBs, before placing the case foam and layering everything into the gasket and securing the daughter board with what seemed to be an overkill of 5 Torx screws. Next in line was the plate, which had these silicone clamp-looking things attached to the sides. They are used to holding everything together, but during shipping these also prevented the other parts from tumbling around in the box, which is very clever. However, for now they have to go, so we can lower the plate and then seal it with the top housing before adding them back to secure everything again. This also gives the Geist a slightly bouncy feel during typing. Not too much, not too little, just about the right amount, for my taste at least. The final bonding was achieved using a number of Torx screws again, before lowering the inner piece back into the outer, returning to whence we came from just a couple of minutes ago. A little fiddly at first, but still a confident fit between the two elements. From here on out, it's everything in reverse for a while, with the magnetic screw being inserted back in before slotting the accent piece with all the satisfaction you might have hoped for. Then it was time for the big moment, the rise of the half moon over the horizon that is the edge of the board. I placed both elements upside down before docking the moon into its permanent position and securing it with the final set of Torx screws, hidden underneath the rubber feet. One final flip and the rotary knob later, I finally gazed upon an almost finished Geist. At this point, my blood was positively pumping and my pupils heavily dilated in preparation to witness the completion. I crossed my fingers and hoped that the chosen caps would lead to a satisfying result, but before we get there, we have to add the switches first. The Sour keys I used on my previous build, the Synth Lab 60, were the chosen winners. I really liked these, and the color works too. For the caps it was unfamiliar territory though, the modern materials from GMK and Mr. Matthew Encina, maker of excellent YouTube videos and now also mechanical keyboard parts, as well as entire boards. With each cap added pressed down, the puzzle inched closer to its grand reveal, and what a reveal it was. I kinda hate how much I end up liking the Geist, because there's no world in which this price tag is in any way justifiable. But it does look and feel fantastic, among the best I've had the pleasure of using, and with it, I also noticed that my keyboard builds kinda reveal a certain styling type. With a price tag like this, I'm also not going to hold back with nitpicks. I tend to complain about small details and sometimes I do feel a bit bad about it, but here, I don't, because this better be absolutely perfect. For starters, for as well as all the parts fit, looking from the top down it's simply not perfect. There's a slightly bigger gap on the bottom right where the inner and outer pieces meet. The middle section on the other hand looks a bit tighter, almost as if there is a bit of an arch to it. I might be able to bend this back, but I'm no bender and I ain't got no more money for the ladies of the night, nor for the playhouse, so I'm not going to risk it. The rest of the tolerances are fine though, especially around the half moon, which is really impressive, but there are two things with it that I don't like. First is the white marking on the top. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't look that clean and almost a little fuzzy. It reminds me a lot of those rub-on tattoos you used to get in gum wrapping when I was a kid. The silicone feet at the bottom are insufficient too. They have a seam going straight through the middle. This is very much nitpicking, but at this price, it should be a clean, uninterrupted surface. Off to the left is the single recessed USB-C port. Unfortunately, it was a bit too tight and I had to switch to a different cable on my desk. Geistmaschine obviously can't account for all USB cables in the world, but I think a slightly wider opening wouldn't have hurt the design too much and increased the compatibility. Then we have the rotary knob, which defaults to volume. I mentioned earlier that I also bought the Studio Macro Pad during my wait for the Geist. When I received that, I was actually a little bit disappointed because for 250 Swiss francs it just doesn't feel that good. The finish doesn't look as great either. It's a very cool concept though, especially the magnetic separation between the modules. But the mentioned knob just feels a bit mushy and the individual notches aren't all that satisfying. They're simply too soft. The knob on the Geist, on the other hand, is a lot better. It's firmer and the nudges feel much more precise, but for my taste it's still not enough. But the worst offender of all for my cannot be unseen brain is probably that it never aligns vertically nor horizontally. Now during daily use, I'm never going to notice this, but I will always know it. In its defense, it's never going to be perfectly centered anyway, but again, for this amount of money, it should at least be capable of it. But even with all these complaints, I couldn't help but enjoy using the Geist, including writing the entire script of this video, as well as editing it. I'm still waiting for my shiny knob and T-stand, which at this point I'm not sure I'd even use, as I'm quite happy with how this matte look turned out. Geistmaschine also released 2 additional boards since then, one of which is made overseas with a more reasonable price in the context of custom keyboards, while the smaller one is made in Germany again. Both look fantastic if you ask me, but the Studio SP especially seems to be a really interesting concept that I wish I could justify to get. Not that you can still buy it, but when you were able to. For now though, I'm not going to play around with the thought of getting any additional Geistmaschine products. Not because the Geist is bad, it's not, and I'm glad I got to see it in person, to experience it, and to the detriment of my wallet, own it. But I still think I spent too much money on this, and if I could do it all over again, I'm pretty certain I'd pick the money instead. However, I wouldn't call this my worst financial decision, and although I do feel a bit of regret, if this video made at least one of you entertained, I think it was well worth it. With that being said, thank you so much for watching and see you again in the next one. Bye!